Okay, I just wanted to take this opportunity to get my thoughts off my chest over this whole Joe Rogan endorsement of Bernie Sanders affair that's kind of blown up, become a really big issue over the last couple of days, because it is just such a wonderful example, the response of some people, of something that you just see again and again and again. And I struggle to get my head around it. It appears that for some people, that they would rather that the sort of their main goal at the end of an election is that they can say that their moral piety is absolutely unsullied, and that is more important than actually achieving something within the election and seeing somebody elected who is more likely to afford them some of the social changes that they would like. They would in effect rather maintain their moral piety, even if it means ending up with Trump-alikes ad infinitum. And this may be taking place in the United States, but this is the same kind of thing that you see in the United Kingdom and that you've seen in the Labour Party, in strands of the Labour Party, for whom it is more important to have the leader that represents your train of thought, even if it means that you don't get elected. You just don't compromise on your principles, even if it means that rather than having somebody who shares some of your principles, you end up with somebody who shares none of them whatsoever. And it's interesting because Joe Rogan, what is Joe Rogan? He's being painted as this most monstrous person, and yet what Joe Rogan is effectively, Joe is the right name for him because he's just a bloke, isn't he? He's just like such a normal kind of a bloke who does, I think it's the most successful podcast in the world now. So he's certainly got some reach as a normal bloke. But that's what he is. He's an average bloke with average bloke kind of views. And effectively, if you find a Joe Rogan so absolutely abhorrent and distasteful, so much hatred for a Joe Rogan, then effectively you have that kind of hatred for the average person. And that becomes a bit of a problem because in any kind of an election, whether it's an election within a party or whether it's an election between parties, you are at some point going to have to appeal to those kinds of average people rather than just the tiny little political sect that you ideologically subscribe to. And this is the thing. There's an article here in The Guardian from yesterday. Bernie Sanders must reconsider Joe Rogan endorsements as LGBTQ group. Human Rights Campaign says podcast host Rogan has attacked countless marginalised groups at every opportunity. Here's the thing. Joe Rogan has been making his podcast for 10 years. I doubt there is anybody in the world that Joe Rogan hasn't said something that he has offended. Indeed, I don't think there is any of us whatsoever that could run a podcast for 10 years and not say something that would significantly offend every single person if that podcast was of the kind where we are being quite open with our views. That is just the nature of things, right? That is just the way that it is. And yet in somebody like Joe Rogan, put your pragmatic hat on for a minute, right? This statement on this particular article, and these articles are all over the place, is from the president of the Human Rights Campaign, Alphonso David. I would suggest to you, Bernie Sanders could have endorsements from Alphonso David's coming out of his ears, and it's not going to gain him very much whatsoever, because that only impresses the kind of people that would be voting for Bernie Sanders anyway, by and large. Whereas Joe Rogan is a very different kettle of fish. As I understand it, amongst the Democratic nominees, Joe Rogan is towards the left of those nominees. And as somebody who is politically central, I know how this works. And that it's very easy when you see somebody who is more towards the margins, either on the right or the left of a party, to start to get a little bit of a nosebleed here and think, well, yeah, I'm not sure I'm prepared to go. I'd rather play it a little bit more safe, have somebody who's a little bit more moderate. And so to see somebody like Joe Rogan, who has generally pretty moderate views yourself, has a big reach, is quite well known. He's a typical kind of average person. Say, no, it's okay. It's okay. Bernie Sanders isn't an extremist. He's not too far gone. He's not too far down a political path. Actually, he's good news. You should be voting for him. You should at least seriously be considering him. Actually, I think that is the kind of ideal endorsement. That is the kind of endorsement that really does galvanise people and make people think, well, okay, yeah, maybe he's a little bit more to the left of me than I'd usually vote for, but no, I feel a little bit more confident voting for this person now. But there is certainly this group of people who portray this whole thing, as I say, it's all about, well, it's about like some kind of moral piety, it would seem. And yet, in actual fact, I propose that might be how they dress it up. But in reality, what these people are, effectively are intellectual xenophobes. They are people who are absolutely, totally uncomfy associating with anybody that is not from the same intellectual, cultural and socio-political mindset as them. It's very much not in my backyard. I'm not prepared to have intellectual political outsiders. I'm not prepared to associate with them. I don't want them anywhere near me. Just keep them away from me. Right? I don't want that kind of interaction with those people. And so anybody who is even remotely different, even if substantially, if you would look at most of the positions, they will agree with you, but they're just not comfy with that. Like I say, it's almost like a kind of intellectual xenophobia. And the funny thing about this, for me, is that these people lack even the slightest amount of introspection or the ability to introspect on the way that they are. They are the people, almost to a man or woman or non-binary individual, that is at present being called wokescolds. I don't know if you've heard that term. That is a term being used by a certain group of people on the political left. And interestingly enough, this group of people on the political left, I would say it is people on the pragmatic left. Not necessarily on the centre left, on the moderate left, in fact, not at all. A lot of people who are using the term wokescold are quite hard left in political terms. They are anarcho-syndicalists, they are communists, they are people with quite hard left-wing political views, and some of them are on the moderate left. And yet they all share something in common, and that is a level of political pragmatism. And realizing that if you're going to achieve anything, you can't stand there in splendid piety and isolation as some kind of intellectual xenophobe. You are going to have to deal with people who largely share the same views as you, but have some views that you disagree with, who have some views that you may find distasteful or offensive. That is just the way that it is. And that is the way that politics has run for decade after decade after decade, because those political sects that cannot do that, that cannot abide that, wither on the vine. And they seem to have noted that. And what they've noted is that there is another group within left-wing thought that just seems to make it their business to just try and condemn anybody and everybody. And that includes calling out anybody on the left, on the same side of politics as them, who steps marginally out of line, who has opinions, who has beliefs that is slightly different from their own. They immediately call them out as bigots, as racists, as terrible people, as Nazi adjacent, and all these kinds of things, right? And it's such a load of bollocks. And in many ways, this idea of the wokescold is pointing at the same thing as the term SJW, social justice warrior, has. Now, that's largely been a term that's never been used in this context on the left. It's been used in the centre and on the political right. Now, to some extent, those on the political right have misused the term. Effectively, the problem with a social justice warrior is simply the social justice, right? But for most people, it's the warriorism. It's not necessarily the social justice opinions. In fact, in some cases, you agree with those opinions, but it is the way that it manifests. It is this warriorist online mentality, largely, where nothing can be let go, where every scab has to be picked, where everything has to be called out, where everything is a problem. A mentality that seems to do in many cases more harm than good. It just alienates those people who otherwise would be your allies. It's like some kind of piety onion constantly shedding off layers, getting down to an ever more dense core that then almost always ends up imploding because there's just nobody left in the room anymore. Now, the interesting thing with this then is that some of those who get called wokescold, most of those who get called wokescold, seem to have cottoned onto this fact that in many ways wokescold is the equivalent to them being called SJWs by people who are more politically central or on the right. And their response to this is to criticise their fellow left-wingers on the grounds that they are effectively using a right-wing dog whistle. You're now making the same arguments against us that the right have been making. Now, the interesting thing with that is that they use that as grounds to dismiss it out of hand rather than grounds for a bit of introspection. I can tell you now, I am politically central of most things. And I expect a certain level of criticism and get a certain level of criticism from people on the right, quite significantly across on the right and significantly across on the left. And it's often the same kinds of criticisms, and I take it fairly lightly. However, if those same criticisms are made from fellow centrists and from people on the centre left and the centre right, my reaction would not be to say, you're now making the same arguments as the far left and the far right was making, so I'm not going to listen. It would be to think, hang on a minute, if the people in the same groups as me are making the same criticisms as me as the people in other groups are making, maybe I'm actually the problem. Maybe a little bit of introspection ought to take place. This is the bit that just I find really, really amusing. If it is true that the wokescold complaint is the same as the SJW complaint that's been made by the right and by the centrists over the last few years, maybe you need to have a little bit of a look at your behaviour, because maybe the reason they're making the same complaint is because it's a genuine complaint, for crying out loud, and it's not just, well, then you're just as bad as the centrists and the right-wingers have been over all this time. What a level of audacious entitlement and self-righteousness, that even when you're getting the same criticism from your own side as you were from the other side, you just assume, well, my own side must be wrong as well now. It couldn't possibly be me. I won't even prepared to consider that it could actually be me and my little group that are out of line, that have got our tactics and our modus operandi something amiss. Okay, that's it. That's all I wanted to say with regard to that. Thank you for watching, and bye for now. And by the way, something that over the next couple of days of video, I'm going to be releasing a video on religiosity and a religious affiliation in the United States. And if you're one of those people, especially in the United States, who bemoans that the United States is a more religious place than Western Europe, I think when you see the data that I'm going over on this video, I think you might find it puts a little bit of a smile on your face. So look out for that video. Okay, that's it. Thanks for watching. Bye for now.